All right, if you will open your Bibles to Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter number 17. We continue our study in the book of Acts, chapter number 17. We're going to be in verse number 16 this evening, Acts chapter 17, verse number 16. And when you find your place there, I invite you to stand as we honor God with the reading of His Word. Acts chapter 17, verse number 16. Now, while Paul waited for them, he's waiting for Silas and Timothy, at Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons, and in the market daily with them that met with him. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him, and some said, What will this babbler say? Others some, He seemeth to be a setter forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him unto Areopagus, saying, May we know what this new doctrine whereof thou speakest is? For thou bringest certain strange things to our ears. We would know, therefore, what these things mean. For all the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear something new, or some new thing. Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, Ye men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are too superstitious. For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription to the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship him, declare I unto you. God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things, and hath made of one blood all nations of men, for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stones, graven by art and man's device, and the times of his ignorance God winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent, because he hath appointed a day in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, in that he hath raised him from the dead. And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, others said, We will hear thee again of this matter. So Paul departed from among them. Howbeit certain men clave unto him and believed, among the which was Dionysius the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with him. Let's pray. Father, as we are to the teaching and the preaching part of the service, Father, this morning I ask that you would once again empty me of myself, Father, that you would cleanse me of my sin, and that you would fill me with thine Holy Spirit, Lord, that I may preach, thus saith the word of the Lord. Father, as we discuss these verses this morning, or that you would help us to pay attention, or that you would help us to focus this morning, that we would not allow Satan to get a foothold, Lord, by way of social media, email, text message, or phone call, or that we would be able to focus on the message, the preaching of your word this morning. Lord, if there's someone here, Lord, that is not saved, or they're not sure if they died today, that heaven would be their home, or that this morning they would place their faith in you, knowing that there is only one faith, or that leads to heaven, that is faith in Jesus Christ. Jesus is the only way, Lord, according to your word. Lord, that today they would make that day, or the day of their salvation. Lord, just thank you also, Lord, for the time that we have this morning. Father, may you have your will and your way this morning, and in the hearts and the lives of every single person that's here. Lord, I ask you these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. And may God bless the reading of his word. So Paul, as we continue to study in his second missionary journey, has been kicked out of Philippi, right? We know, we talked about Philippi. Then he goes to Thessalonica because he got kicked out of Philippi, preaches there, gets kicked out of Thessalonica, heads to Berea, and has a little more success in Berea than he did in Philippi and Thessalonica, because the Bible tells us that they searched the Scriptures. They had a better attitude. Remember, we talked about that last week. Had a better attitude at Berea than in Philippi and Thessalonica. But those in Thessalonica heard about the preaching of Christ in Berea, and some Jews came from there to cause trouble in Berea and caused Paul to get kicked out of Berea, and left and headed south and made his way to Athens. And when he got to Athens, it says that he sent for Silas and Timothy to come down to meet with him in Athens. And this morning we see why he sent for Timothy and Silas to come down from Berea, because he left Timothy and Silas there in Berea to continue the ministry there, because a new church there was planted, and they needed a preacher and help train some folks there. And he comes to Athens and sends word to Timothy and Silas to come, and they head that way. And we're speaking this morning on the Gospel at Athens, Part 1, the Gospel to Athens, Part 1. We'll be spending Part 2 next Sunday morning, Lord willing. But as Paul is in Athens, and we look in verse number 16, it says here that, now while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred in him. We're going to spend some time this morning on that. We're going to go into just a little bit of background about what's going on there. Listen, we don't have to know every detail about Athens. We don't have to, a historian doesn't have to get up here and tell you every detail about Mars Hill and the Greek mythology of there, what's going on, the background there. What we do need to know is this, is that Athens, like us today, is filled with idolatry. Now, we may not have the statues that people fall down and worship here in America, as many as they had there, but make no mistake that we are a nation that is given over to idolatry. And so, and this is what I want to spend the time on, is talking about Paul. He was stirred in his spirit, and the result of that. Listen, as Paul has been kicked out of several cities, and putting ourselves in Paul's shoes, if it was us that were being kicked out of a few cities, that you and I may say, maybe I need a break, because he's been arrested, he's been beaten, and maybe we just might say, you know, my body just can't handle another beating. And you and I might say, well, and listen, that would be logical, wouldn't it? You know what? I've been busy in the ministry. I've gone here and there, and listen, I've just been ran out of every single city I've gone to. And maybe Paul thought he needed a break, and it could have been that he went down there for a break, but instead is when he saw the city of Athens given wholly to idolatry, it says his spirit was stirred within him. And so I want you to look here in verses 16, through 21, and also verse 23, that the city of Athens, listen, they covered all their bases when it came to religion and gods, because in verse 23 here Luke records for us when it says, Paul, for I passed by and beheld your devotions, talking about all the altars that you have. I found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. Listen, the Athenians, man, they covered all their bases. They really, didn't know who was the one true God. All they knew is there was a lot of gods out there that people have come and brought their way, and and they discussed, and they had all these altars because they didn't want to feel left out, anyone to be left out. Listen, that's why they had almost all the buildings had statues that represented some sort of false god. That we would call it false god, but to them it would be some kind of god, because that's what they were all about. They didn't want to leave anyone out, and so they were unsure about how many gods there were and unsure about who to worship, so they made as many altars as they could with as many gods as that they knew about, and so they really covered their bases. And if we look at our own country today, we would say, well, there's a lot of different people groups here. We're a melting pot, right? And there's a lot of different people groups, and a lot of different people groups worship different things, different gods. And though we don't have a bunch of so-called altars out in the public for people to fall down and worship, there are different religions out there that have different buildings. I mean, in Baytown, you have all these other different religions in our own city, and you go into Houston, and it widens the margin there of the different religions that are there, and so here this is what Paul is faced with, and the question that I pose myself, listen, this is something that I've been wrestling with the last few weeks, or something I've been wrestling with is having more of a desire to be more gospel-centered when I'm out in public, when I'm at work. There's time, let's be honest. With men, when we shop, we go after that one thing and come back, and that's it. We're not the type of people that will, as guys, they'll go up and down the aisle and shop and look and look at different things. And me, and where I've been struggling with is, well, when I go out, I am so focused on what I'm getting that I don't see outside my parameters. And I need to be more gospel, sharing the gospel, more focused in those who are around me and what's going on around me to share the gospel. And so Paul here, he's here at Athens. He sees a whole city giving wholly to idolatry, and it stirs him up. And he sees an altar with the inscription, to the unknown God. That should give us some kind of idea of the spiritual and religious realm of Athens. It should give us a clue. Listen, most of us, and I would say in America, who grew up in America, have heard of Jesus. Growing up, you every Easter, the Ten Commandments comes on television, right? And you also hear, and almost every Christmas, you're going to get the Peanut story. You're going to get Peanuts with Charlie Brown and Linus and all of them. And you're going to hear about, at Christmas, you're going to hear that. And you'll see things, Jesus is the reason for the season. And most of us grew up hearing about Jesus. Well, listen, here in Athens, they knew nothing about God, the one true God. All they knew of was there was all these gods. Well, in America today, we hear there are many roads to God. That's what you'll hear that. Oprah Winfrey has said it. There's a lot of politicians that'll say it. There's a lot of different celebrities will say, well, we're all on different roads, but we're all headed to the same place. No, my friend, I'm not headed to hell with you. I'm saved. I place my faith in Jesus. because he's the way, the truth, and life. No man come to the Father but by him, is what he says. So I'm not on the same road as you, headed to the same place. I'm headed to heaven. And so, but that's where we are in our America, because, and we have all these different religions, and they're saying we're all headed to the same place. We're just taking different roads to get there. And so this was Athens. All types of different gods and altars and idols and statues there. So when Paul gets there in Athens, he sees this. He's moved in his spirit because of this. And where does Paul go like he normally goes? Goes to the synagogue, right? The Spirit was turned in him when he saw the city was wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue. So he goes to the synagogue to talk with the Jews, but he doesn't just stay in the synagogue. He also goes elsewhere, as it says in verse number 17, and with the devout persons, and in the market daily, with them that met with him. So he would go. He went to the synagogue, wanted to talk to the Jews, because remember he was a Jew there. He was a Jew and had wanted the Jews to be saved, and so he'd go to the synagogue and talk with the Jews. But he also went to the marketplace. Listen, even though back then, I think today there's still a place for street preaching. Hello? There's still a place for street preaching. To go out into the marketplace. We have grocery stores, and we may not have a big marketplace as they do in other countries, but you can still go. When we have farmers markets. Baytown has, I think, a farmers market. I don't know if it's every week, or at least I know they have one at least once a month, that we could go out and we could speak and proclaim the gospel in these places. And so I'm not saying we could go out there and be a nuisance, but Paul was going to the marketplace, and he was talking to folks who would go and meet with him, who would listen to him to preach about Jesus and the resurrection. Because it says there later, up to verse 21, that people came to him and was listening to him about this new doctrine that they've never heard of, and he would speak to them about Jesus and the resurrection. And so Paul, he disputes with those that would listen. So listen, while Paul waited for Silas and Timothy, it says that his spirit was moved because of the darkness in Athens, because of the city given to idolatry. And as he's speaking in the market and other places, people wanted to hear him. And so what did they do? It says that they took him to Areopagus, which is Mars Hill, and which is a high place there in the city, a high rocky area in the city, to where he could speak and they could spread out and they could hear what Paul had to say. And so we see that it says there, then in verse number 20, or verse 19, they took him and brought him to Areopagus, saying, we may know this new doctrine. They wanted to hear. There were several folks that wanted to hear what Paul had to say, because they never heard of the resurrection of the dead. They never heard of Jesus being raised from the dead. So they take him to Mars Hill, this rocky area, to hear what he has to say. And then we see in verse 23, he says, you're very religious. You have all these altars. And he begins, I want to talk to you about a certain altar that I saw that says to the unknown God. I want to declare him to you. And so his spirit is so moved within him that as they bring him to Mars Hill, this is how he starts to preaching unto them. When those in Athens heard Paul preach about the resurrection of Jesus, several of them were intrigued. They said, for thou bringest certain strange things to our ears. Because, listen, verse 21, it says, For all the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing else but what? To hear some new thing. And so they've never heard of the resurrection of Jesus. And so their ears perked up and wanted to hear it. And so they took him to Mars Hill. Now, Paul wasn't there to defend himself like at Philippi, at Thessalonica, or in Berea. They didn't drag him to Mars Hill so he can defend himself about what he's preaching. No, they brought him to Mars Hill because they wanted to hear what Paul had to say about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So, this morning, and then next week as we continue into the rest of the chapter, when we live in a world like Athens, filled with idolatry, why aren't we moved in our spirit as Paul was when he saw a city given wholly to idolatry? This is what I want to focus on this morning. Paul was moved in his spirit when he saw the idolatry in Athens. As believers today, there's a lot of us that are not moved within our spirit because when we have a city, a lot of cities in our state and our nation that are filled with idolatry. Listen, let's just hit the rubber where it meets the road. There's a lot of folks, hear me now, that got up early this morning. Now, I don't know if the Texans have a home game or not, but whether it's Texans, Houston, or Dallas, or any other metropolitan city that have a football team that's playing it, and they will get up early, even though they worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. They will get up, pay hundreds of dollars to go see a sporting event in some dome somewhere and watch a bunch of men beat up on each other. In the NFL, they will get up early and go and worship what they love to give their time to, but won't get up to come to church. Oh, I'd go to church if it wasn't so early. Well, you'll get up early to go to a football game. You'll stay up late having to work the next morning to go to the Astro game. I'm just saying, listen, we'll stay up and watch the debate between Vance and Waltz or Trump and Kamala or whoever. We'll watch the political things. We'll stay up and we'll clear our time in our schedule so we can watch this or so we can watch that. But listen, we'll get stirred up when we talk about our side of politics, but we don't get our spirits not stirred up when we see a world given to idolatry, headed for hell. No. We'll just say, well, let's just see what's on TV. Hello? Why isn't our spirit stirred up like it was at Paul's? Well, listen, Paul was an apostle. He was a preacher. No. He saw the world through the eyes of a missionary. Can I help you this? A missionary is not some title we give to folks who go to a foreign field. Missions is what we as the church are given to do. The great what? Commission. And so, why is it not us? Why is not our spirit stirred as Paul? That word, when talking about his spirit was stirred, if you look that word up, it means it was agitated. Maybe even aggravated. Well, Paul, he goes to a city that's given to idolatry, and he sees all the idols and the paganism that's going on there, and he's aggravated? Well, why wouldn't he be? Why wouldn't he be? Paul's response was because that he had a love for the one true God, And idolatry is an insult and a lie to the glory of God. Listen, idolatry, it's an insult to the glory of God. It's a lie to the glory of God. And Paul saw this, and he was stirred within him. Paul wanted folks to know God and to know who God is and worship Him. Listen, God, through the children of Israel, cleared out an entire land that He gave to the children of Israel because they worshipped idols and, hey, listen to this, believed in abortion. What do you mean they did abortion? They murdered their babies to Balaam. That's what abortion, that's really where it started. Listen, abortion is not political, it's moral. And so, listen, I believe there's a few commandments out of the 10 Commandments that deal with relationship with God. Thou shalt not have no other what? Gods before me. I mean, he spends some time in the 10 Commandments about man in himself. Paul says this to the believers at Rome in Romans 1:20, chapter 1, verse 22 and 23, and also verse 25. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and to four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Verse 25, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and listen, worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. This is what Paul said. This is what those in Rome, not Rome, but those in Rome, but also we're talking about Athens. This is what they're doing. They're taking the image of man and other creeping things, making them into gods, and worshiping the creation rather than the Creator. And Paul, when he sees the whole city doing this, he stirred within him. His spirit is stirred within him. Why? Because man has turned the creation, man, into idols and gods, and not worshiping the Creator. Why aren't we moved with this same passion? Why aren't we moved with a passion for the truth and a hatred for error? You know, I hear in this political season that we're in, a politician will say, well, me speaking as a Christian. No. It's not me speaking as a Christian. Let me tell you the truth. Listen, we, as believers, we're not putting these false gods and these false religions equal with God. So I'm not going to say, well, speaking from a Christian, we'll say, well, let me tell you the truth. And they'll go on whatever tangent they're going on about whatever subject it is. Well, speaking as a Christian, abortion to me, and they or whatever the situation may be. No, we ought to have a passion for truth and a hatred for error. Why? We know the truth. We know the truth. How do we know the truth? It's in your lap. God has revealed to us the truth, that He is the one true God, and He shares His glory with no other God. He shares his glory with no other false god. Are we moved for the passion of the truth and a hatred for error as Paul was? I dare say we're not. Why? Well, if I asked you today, if each one of us were to ask one another, did we share the gospel with anyone this week? Did anyone get saved this week because we were sharing the gospel with them? If we did not share the gospel with anyone this week, we do not have a passion for truth or a hatred for error. Well, I'm not the preacher. Doesn't matter. Jesus gave the Great Commission to the church, not to the preacher, not to the missionary, not to the evangelist, not to the deacon or the trustee, to every one of us. Because the church was the one that was there. When he says, you shall be witnesses of me, is what he says. And so, why don't we have this passion? Well, it's because we give in to the flesh too much. We like sin and disobedience too much. Let me ask you a question. Did you have to teach your child to lie? Did you have to teach your child to steal? Did you have to teach your child to disobey? No, we don't, do we? It comes natural. That's why we don't have a passion for truth and a hatred for error, because of our flesh. Because we like sin and disobedience too much. We're all like Eve, Adam and Eve. See, Paul saw the city of Athens through the eyes of a missionary. We're all to be missionaries. Are we not? All the children of God, right? As believers, were we not the children of God adopted into his family? Folks, we are to be moved in our spirit with the passion for truth and the gospel, and a hatred for error and idolatry, to cause us to be like Paul and make the proclamation of the gospel the most important thing that we do. I told we all have to have a job. We all have to work to pay bills, don't we? But that is not to be the most important thing in our life. As believers, the gospel is to be the most important thing. The proclamation of the gospel is to be the main thing. That's what we're to give the most time to. As much of the other hobbies that I like to do, that's not what I'm to give the most of my time to do. As much as I love to go fishing and catching reds and bass and all these other things, I'm not to give the majority of my time to that. As much as I love to go out to the gun range and shoot and enjoy my time there, relieve some stress even, I'm not to give my time, the majority of my time, to that. No, I'm to give the majority of my time that I can to the proclamation of the gospel. And when I have a passion for truth and a hatred for error, as Paul did, I'll be like Paul. Because didn't Paul tell the church to follow him as he follows Christ? He did. We're to, if I can say this, we're to witness like Paul. See this world. See Baytown, Highlands, Beach City, Crosby, New Baytown. Mont Bellevue, that's just a stick for those who live in Mont Bellevue. No. Whatever suburb or city or town that you live in, we're to witness like Paul and make the proclamation of the gospel the main thing. Because in the end, that's what's going to matter. In the end, that's what's going to keep people from being thrown into hell. Because we did our job in witnessing. Listen, it's not up to us whether they get saved or not. It's up to us whether we give the message or not. God's the one who gives the increase. He's the one that does the saving. He's the one, through His Spirit, convicts men of sin. It's our job to give them the message. Are we giving them the message of God's only Son, paying eternal life? Are we giving that message, or are we just going to let other people do it? Because, well, I'm not called to preach. I'm not called to be a deacon. I'm not called. Listen, I'm just a woman. I'm just this. You can give whatever excuse you want to. But I'm telling you, it will not hunt when you're standing before Jesus giving an account for what you did with this life. That dog won't hunt. That bucket won't hold water. Are you passionate about sinners hearing about a holy God who sent His only Son, Jesus, to die for them, to pay their sin debt? Because their sin will send them to hell. Are you passionate about telling someone that your sin doesn't have to send you to hell? Your sin debt can be paid, and Jesus paid it in full. If you'll place your faith and your trust in Him, you'll have everlasting life. Are you passionate about that message? The truth. And want to get that message out? Why aren't we witnessing like Paul? I challenge you this morning, folks, as believers, those of you that are members of the Groth Road Baptist Church, those of you who are church members elsewhere and you're just visiting this morning, I challenge you, be passionate about the proclamation of the gospel. I'm going to tell you this. There's no better passion to have in this world than the passion of reaching folks with the gospel. It's the most rewarding passion you'll ever have. Why? Because the rewards that God's going to give us because of that will be more valuable than having the state record for the biggest redfish. To have the record for hitting the target at 100, 200, 300 yards. Or having the best baseball team throughout the decades, or football team, or whatever legacy they have. The rewards that we're going to get from Jesus because of sharing the gospel, winning souls, that we get to give back to Him will far outweigh anything that you and I can get on this side of heaven. Will you be passionate about the gospel message? If you're not, will you be willing to come to the altar this morning and ask God to help you to get that passion, to have a passion for proclaiming the truth, to have that hatred for error, to want to go out and to share the truth of the gospel with your neighbors, co-workers, waitresses, wherever it is you go? I'm asking God to give me more of a passion for that. And because this is the will of God, to go out and to share the gospel, I wholeheartedly believe that He'll give me that passion. Father, as